This conference will now be recorded.
Hi everyone, welcome to the AWS training program, and today's topic is code deploy. So there are few developer related, you can say deployment related services. Like yesterday we talked about code build and code commit. So in the same series, the next service we have is code deploy. As the name indicates, this is used to deploy your code on different type of resources, like that can be EC2, because there should be some server which will be running your code. So that can be EC2, that can be Lambda, or that can be like any other server as well. So let's talk about this one. We'll start with the agenda. So the agenda for today's class is overview of code deploy, create a code deploy application, create a deployment group, create a deployment, AppSpec configuration, and deployment status, or you can say monitoring the deployment. So code deploy is a service which you can say comes under continuous deployment. We have CI/CD concept, right? So yesterday we talked about code build, which was fulfilling the requirement for continuous integration, and this one is for continuous deployment. So it automates application deployment to EC2 instance, AWS Fargate, and AWS Lambda. Code deploy fully automates your application deployment, eliminating the manual operation. So suppose you are maintaining your code in one of the Git repo, that can be external GitHub or that can be internal code commit. From there, it can pick your code and it can deploy on the variety of different like servers. Code deploy protects your application from downtime during deployments through rolling updates. Let me explain this third point. So suppose your current application is working perfectly fine, but now you are planning to rolling the upgrades. You have some newer version of application, but when you are rolling the updates, you don't want that suddenly your application stops working. That you don't want. So we will roll the updates in a sequential manner. Code deploy can help you that it will redirect the 10% of traffic to the newer application and 90% of traffic to the older application, so that even if your newer application is not working perfectly fine or having some issues, right, then your entire all the customers will not be affected. And gradually you can define like every 1 minute it will change from 10% to 20, then 30, 40. So gradually it will move your traffic from newer older application towards the newer application. That would be like slowly migrating to the newer one. And once everything is working fine, your entire 100% traffic will be moved to the newer version of your code. So this will help you to migrate. At the same time, code deploy tracks and store the recent history of your deployments. Suppose in last few months you have done multiple releases, so you can always monitor that. You can check that, okay, these are the releases which we have done in previous months on this date, this time it has taken, or which one was successful, which one was failed. All these things will be maintained in the history of code deploy. That can help you to quickly analyze your applications development. So this is very brief about what code deploy is. Once we will do it practically, it will make much more sense, and we will be doing that practically. So let's start with creating a code deploy application. So let me open my AWS console and we'll be doing it practically. Okay, so we'll go to code deploy. Code deploy, yes. So you can see that there is no application in the code deploy, but we can create that. First of all, let me change my region because I'm in Singapore region, right? Singapore. Okay. So there is no application as of now, but we will create that. So let's do that. We'll give some name. We can give this one, code deploy test app. Okay. Compute platform, as I said, like your code should be deployed somewhere. That can be any type of server. That can be ECS, that is containerized application. That can be EC2, or the simplest one is serverless, right? That is your Lambda, because Lambda launches server at the time of execution, and once your execution is done, it will terminate that. So this is very cheap because you don't have to keep your server running all the times. So out of these three, you can choose any. You can see that EC2 or on-premise, AWS Lambda, or Amazon ECS. So let's do it with Lambda. That would be simple to understand. And create application. That's all. It simply asks like the name and the type. So the type is Lambda and the name is this one. So we are done with this. Now, since we are thinking about Lambda deployment automation, we should have a Lambda for that, so that we can play around that Lambda, right? So let's do one thing. Let's go to Lambda and we'll be creating a Lambda function. Okay, so we'll create a Lambda function. We'll create and author from scratch. We can create it from scratch. So we can give some name. I would give code deploy test Lambda. Okay, you can give any name. I'm giving code deploy test Lambda function to make it more meaningful, right? We can, let's do in some underscore also you can give. That's my point. Code deploy test Lambda function. Okay, and the runtime we can choose anything, maybe Python. And execution role, because we earlier created execution role for one of our Lambda, we can use the same. This one, my first Lambda execution role, that's we can use. That's all. So function name and the runtime environment, and that's all. We'll click on create function. Okay, now let's see what's written in the Lambda function. To make it simple, I will remove all these things. We'll just put a print statement, nothing else. Print hello from Lambda version 1. Okay, I'm just giving some sample code, so we'll deploy this. Okay, now what you can do is you can create different versions of your Lambda function. You can add like more, you can edit your code, and that can be deployed as a version 2. So let's do one thing. Let's create some alias. So there is no alias, right? So I will create one alias. I will give Lambda function alias. Okay, and version we haven't created yet, right? So let's do one thing. We'll create the version first. So you can click on versions and publish a new version. V1 publish. Okay, and we can give the alias also. So this alias and these are nothing but a different name to your Lambda, and you can have different code at different stages, and you can maintain the versions, so that switching from one version to another version would be quite easy. So we'll create one alias, and this will point to version 1. Okay, save. Now let's make some other change to your code.